get cracking.
So,
So, okay,
yeah,
guys, let's go. So we have Tom from Solemate. You can see the logo in the background, and we're going to have a chat today about this really cool and interesting, innovative 3D printed insoles. So it's super cool to have you here today, Tom. If you just want to get cracking, have a little bit of a background about yourself, how you got into skiing, boot fitting, and now what's led you to starting this really cool company.
cool. Well, hey Johnny, it's really cool to be here. Thanks for having me. So yeah, Soulmate. Unlike many of your listeners, I didn't grow up skiing. I wasn't on the slopes as a 3-year-old. I actually started skiing at university. So I vividly remember all of my first ski memories because it was it's about a decade ago. But while I was at uni, I studied product design engineering, and that subsequently led me to work in the mountain bike industry. I worked for a company called Ride Rat, and
Cool.
at Ride Rat, we would 3D scan mountain bikes, and then we would create paint protective film that would cover the surface of the bikes. That's going to be relevant when I start talking a little bit more about Soulmate. So fast forward a couple of years, I started ski boot fitting, obviously skiing being a big passion of mine. Started ski boot fitting in Norwich in a little ski shop called Snowfit, who are now our next door neighbours, funnily enough. And having that engineering background and just exposure to how we could leverage technology to create a more standardized, reliable, and ultimately more comfortable product, something just went ding in my mind, and I came up with the idea of, could we 3D print an insole? Could we 3D scan the foot in a retail environment, 3D scan the foot, manipulate that data, and then reproduce it to create a 3D printed insole? So racked up behind me are a bunch of 3D printers. And so that's kind of the foundation of Soulmate. And I suppose it started like many people's businesses as a side hustle. And I kept working in the ski shop, and now after a couple of years, it's full time, and we now have a retailer network across the UK. And yeah, we're trying to build the product out and build a user base, and yeah, that brings us to today.
Super cool. I think that's it's really cool because if you think about the ski industry, there's so many brands that they come off the tip of your tongue because they have such like a cemented you know thing with skiing. Like you think of skiing, you immediately think of Atomic, or you think of like these really famous ski resorts and this kind of stuff. So it's really cool to see that there is a lot of innovation going on within the ski industry, and especially like with boot fitting, because boot fitting is such a nightmare. I mean, a lot of people who listen to this podcast or who are getting into skiing as a passion, like you did yourself as an adult, they'll realize like eventually my boots are a fundamental thing and a big problem if I don't get them done right. And like, of course, with ski boots, there's a startup cost, but the reality is if you don't invest correctly, it's going to cost you more money down the line because you're going to have to change boots, you're going to have to change insoles, you're going to have to change liners. Like I myself, like I find this super interesting because I have really flat feet, and like because of that, in the beginning, I didn't really know too much about boot fitting. And so like I ended up with, kind of like some heel spurs and all this kind of stuff. And then it's like led to me to experiment with insoles, experiment with liners, like all different stuff. Like I haven't tried the foam liners yet. But I've tried what are they, zip fit and all that kind of stuff. Still couldn't get it to work. And I've tried like with the head when they have like they tried like the injection stuff. And I tried like out of the box insoles. I've tried handmade insoles. So like this kind of stuff, like I find like when I go into the ski shop, they've got these like boot dock scanners now, and they scan your feet and they show you that. But then the guy still goes to like the back of the shop and he chooses himself. It's not like they've got this scan, but he then uses the scan for information to then decide what he or she will give you. So it's not like they have this information, but then how they use the information is still very personal. Like the boot fitter makes the choice. So this really intrigues me because it's like if when we go into more of your process, you're saying like you 3D scan someone's foot, and then you use that 3D scan to build the insole exactly to what they need. And that really interests me as a skier, because I'm like, oh, I have quite difficult feet.
Mm.
So I know I need a personalized fit. So do you want to explain kind of the process of someone comes in, your boot fitters with your retailers in the UK, okay, I've got the perfect insole for you. Let me scan your feet. Let's start the process. Do you want to talk us through how that works?
Yeah, for sure. Um, what you just said, by the way, about boot fitting kind of being this dark art
Mm,
where it's very judgment based. It's, people have their boot fitter who they always want to go to because they think that they know them the better, and that may be true, but it can't be that everyone's getting that right if everyone's got a different system surrounding it. Um, so our ambition really has been to truly standardize the approach to capturing the information, processing the information, turning it into some kind of useful product. Um, it's also my belief that a lot of the issues to do with boot fitting come from the fact that we're starting with an off-the-shelf solution and then trying to modify it down to eventually be something that is personalized. Given that we're in manufacturing of customized things, my belief is that we actually should just be making this to the end user from the start point, because it involves less wastage and ultimately ends up with a better product for them.
mm,
Um, but yeah, in answer to your question, so what's the process of like customer visiting a store? So they'll pop into just usually a ski shop with boot fitting. We do some have some other retailers in slightly different disciplines. We also do some physiotherapy things, but most of our customers pop into a ski shop and they're having their ski boot fit. They're not necessarily like a super pro racer or super high level athlete. I mean, they may be, but most of our customers, as most skiers are just regular people trying to have a comfortable skiing experience. So during their boot fit, the boot fitter will usually just sort of introduce the idea of, hey, have you considered having a custom insole? Which most people are just, perhaps they don't use insoles at all in their daily life, and they might think, why do I need one
mm,
in a ski boot? Uh, and that's a really, really valid question. Having strong feet outside of skiing, whether that comes from gym work or flexibility or stretching or whatever it is really, really important. When we come to put someone into a ski boot, and the amount of balance that's required, that is really driven through the foundation, your feet, from steep terrain, rough cobbled snow, whatever it is, your feet can really start to work very, very hard, and that creates an ache, which is extremely familiar, I'm sure, to any
mm.
skier.
I've got it
So
already. Yeah.
yeah. If we start that person with strong feet outside of their boots, and then put them into a well-fitting ski boot with an insole that contours their foot within the boot, it's going to reduce that fatigue and improve the support factors of the boot. What that's going to mean is their feet are going to be comfortable all day long. So the boot fitter might introduce that as an idea. We have some like demonstration kind of average foot shape products that could be
Mm,
dropped in, so someone can just have a feel of how the boot might be behaving with something more supportive in the boot. But for most people, that's usually the point where they say, yeah, this I can already feel a difference, and it only is going to get better when we create the actual personalized product. So we use a format of scanning called true depth scanning, which is essentially an array of 30,000 infrared dots. Um, and this is actually the same technology that's used in facial recognition for opening your iPhone or your iPad Pro or whatever it is. And so it's very good for picking up the contours, and particularly kind of skin, I suppose. It's really optimized to picking up kind of bio data. Uh, so a quick scan is taken. It literally takes 2 or 3 seconds to do either foot. Um, the boot fitter then will help guide the customer through kind of range of different choices. So they may choose to have a very stiff insole that's more performance oriented because they just really want the boot to feel very, very responsive. Or perhaps they just ski from bar to bar and they want to have a nice relaxed day, and in which case we could make them a much more compliant and soft product. And so the customer, there's a huge suite of choices that are possible, but we also try not to overload that, because most people actually, they're coming into a ski shop not necessarily to have a realignment or some kind of medical intervention. They're coming in to have a performance and comfort. That's what they're there for. So the scans are then uploaded. They come to our facility in Norwich, and that's where our server sits, and this is where the scans arrive at, and our digital automation then processes those scans into the insole. So that shape of the insole is completely driven by that scan data. It is the digital representation of having the person's foot physically in front of you. And because we have a standardized digital process, whoever takes that scan and wherever it comes from, it will always create the same custom insole for that individual, which is creating that just like highly standardized and repeatable custom insole process. Once we have that, we have basically a digital, three-dimensional custom insole that you can see on screen, and then we push that through to one of our machines. We 3D print the product from a thermopolyurethane, a foaming thermopolyurethane, and kind of feels a little bit like a textile when it's finished. I'm sure we'll be able to like maybe drop in some images or show people a little bit about what the product looks like. But yeah, it takes 4 to 6 hours per insole to 3D print, so it is a slow process and a highly precise process. Fortunately, we've got lots of machines, so that means we can get it through our customers. But we then those insoles are then finished. When they come off the printer, we package them up and we either ship them back to the ski shop for a final fit, or they are shipped direct to the customer. And that whole process takes less than a week, usually about 5 days.
Awesome. Let's put that. I think that's very cool because, if you think of a kind of a classic style insole process, they put you on the board with like the sand, and they move the sand around, and they get you to stand up, and then they kind of do that, and then they heat the insole up, they lay the insole in the impression of your foot, and if they want to build the arch, let's say, they kind of push it in a little bit where the arch is, and then they take the insole out, they let it cool down, and then it's like good to go. And then if you want it to be a bit harder, like I do, because I need my insoles in my race boots for performance skiing, then they kind of like pack it out with kind of like foam that hardens under the arch. Like that's what I've been having for the last 6-7 years kind of thing. And it's like to hear that you can scan my feet and then use that scan to then build the insole. So it's that standardization is there, and the information is being used. How many infrared dots was it? You said
30,000. Yeah, 30,000.
30,000 infrared dots. Those 30,000 points of information on my foot is coming into the computer, and the computer's using that information to build my insole. And you said as well that you can also choose what kind of insole you want. So you're saying you can make this insole softer depending on what you want. So like, let's say I want, because this is my problem as well, like I need insoles for my touring boots, and I go touring a lot, and it's like, then if I'm touring for 8 hours a day and I've got a super stiff insole, then I'm getting like plantar fasciitis, like, in the heel. I think that's how you say it properly. I can never, when you get the aggravation in the heel, just like when runners run too much, and the running shoes have changed so much. If you look at a running shoe, how they've changed, and so I'm not getting that from my insoles in my touring boots. So if I could then have a touring boot insole where I can decide, okay, I want it soft, but I still want it to be usable for skiing. But the reality is that I'm going to be walking in this boot for 8 hours, 6-7 hours, and then skiing for like, let's say 40 minutes. That's the reality of the situation. And then in my race boots, I could have a proper stiff insole that's going to get that dynamic kind of pop straight into the the feedback straight into the boot, which is what I want on a
Mm.
performance ski, is very interesting, from my standpoint, and I can make sure that the insoles fit my feet really well. Can you do any kind of adjustments? Because my problem is that like there's a really good ski trainer out there called Tom Gelling. He's a big advocate for not having an insole, and I can understand that because a lot of people have a good arch, and they need that room for the arch to move because it functions well. But for someone like myself, if I stand in a boot without an insole, my foot completely collapses. So my knees pronate inwards, so I'm actually not in a nice neutral position before I even start. So I do need some support to help my feet. So can you play with the construction of the insole before you print it to like change the shape of the insole for, depending, if you like, for me, I need to have a stronger arch in my insole. Can you do that?
Yeah, so there's two ways that that can be introduced into the insole. So uh, one is physical. The way in which scan is taken is slightly different. So what we will ask uh, the customer being scanned to do is to lift their toes into, and this is called windlass position, and it
Hmm.
basically dorsiflexes the medial arch of the foot. So what that means is that if your foot is collapsing, lifting your toes puts your foot into the sort of more athletic position. If you imagine like you're running and you're sort of in that takeoff position, that your
Yeah,
toes are actually raised upwards, and that generates medial arch. So that can, for someone like you who's got super flat feet, um,
pancake
having
flat.
having your scan take in that position simulates your foot in being in that more dynamic, loaded position, and will create an insole that is effectively has like a higher arch, but it's still completely your foot shape. It's just your foot in that active position.
Mm.
Not everybody needs that though. If someone's has natural definition in their foot, even in a sort of resting neutral position, then they can just be scanned as normal. So we train boot fitters to identify when an individual might benefit from this slightly different scanning position. Um, there is also within the app that accompanies the whole Solemate process, and this is where you'd specify if you were having the stiffer or the softer insole. You are, or a boot fitter is able to basically input any changes that they'd like to the insole. So this might be something like heel lifts. So effectively increasing the ramp angle of the boot, but also sitting the heel into the heel pocket, which is, again, it's an off-the-shelf product. It's not everybody always sits into the heel pocket of the boot properly. So having some kind of method of adjusting that, on screen without it being some kind of manual um, workshop process that you have to go and make something. It's actually just very quick and on screen. We can also post the insole, so that's tilting the insole in left and right plane. Just trying to think if people are listening, I'm
Yeah,
doing
yeah,
things with
because
my
it's
hands.
pronated stuff, and yeah, because the words
Exactly.
get very medical very quickly as soon as you start talking about, if the foot collapsing or a high arch or a low arch, it's very easy, and then it
Yeah,
gets
yeah.
a bit
If,
much.
for those listening, we are basically able to tilt the insole in a forward or aft plane, but also a left and right plane, and
Mm.
that alongside a range of other adjustments that are possible, can help to realign that person if the scanning alone means that they're not getting enough power from the insole,
Yeah,
or vice versa, if they just need some realignment.
yeah. So because if I actually have a ski boot here, and
Yeah.
I'll just grab my ski boot. So I explained kind of a bit of what you were talking about. People will get to see my absolutely knackered boots here, but they do the job. Like if this you can see, like it's just been mothered by hours and hours of skiing.
That's good.
So
You can only trust the people with absolutely knackered kit because they've
yeah,
been using it.
but this is the thing. It's like it's such a long process for me to change boots because
Mm.
um, you know, so it's just a nightmare. But so what's really interesting is what you were talking about is like alignment there. So if we explain. that a little bit with the people. So it's like if I just hold my boot like this, let's say it's like aligned really nicely and everything goes in a like with your legs in a straight line. What you're saying about changing it left and right and the ramp angle as well. So in the boot, you know, you can be like this or like that depending on what you need, or you can have the insole like left or right depending on what you need. That's really cool because normally if you were going to change those angles, so like let's say you wanted someone's foot to be more tilted so that the knees come together, let's say it like that, or you wanted them to be tilted so that the knees come apart, you know, often people would do that with the plates on the boot.
Mm.
That would be one way, or they'd actually change the alignment of the cuff here. They would move the
Yeah, the
cuff this way
canting.
or that way. The canting is exactly so. But what you're saying is you can actually just do that already with the insole, which
Yeah, so that can come from the insole, and I think it's also important to reference that like this goes alongside good boot fitting as well. So it may be that there's a
yeah,
combination of things going on, whether that be binding boot interface shims, which was the first thing you talked about, or canting, which is
yeah,
the alignment of the cuff. So it also uh, insole alignment is part of that story there.
yeah.
So it may not necessarily replace it entirely, but when
It's definitely a new
integrated.
dimension. Yeah, it's definitely because I've never had that offered to me before. I've 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 had canting offered, you know, the top part of the boot, and even some people talking about then doing it with the plates. So on most ski boots, you have these plastic plates that go on the bottom, and now with the new machines, they can cut them to certain angles
Mm,
as well. So that's a new way of doing it, but in combination with the insole as well. That's because you know normally when you even if you get a custom insole, the reality is it comes out of a packet. It's a standard width, it's a standard shape, and they actually have to cut the insole to fit inside your boot. And like
yeah.
a big problem for me is volume, like because I have like incredibly wide feet, but then on top of that, because my arches collapse, you know what happens is my foot should be like this, but it collapses so it gets even wider. So you know it creates loads of problems with the volume.
Yeah.
And then, like you were talking about the heel pocket as well. Like I've got big heel spurs, but that's because the heel pocket, you know, the basically the heel in the back of the boot is lifting sometimes. So it's a lot of work with boot fitting. But then they, you know, when they put the custom insoles in, sometimes they take up too much room in the boot.
Mm,
And I actually have this in all my normal shoes as well because I have to use orthotics in my normal shoes and my running shoes and everything. That they it lifts my foot too high, so it means my heel is then in a bad position in the heel pocket. Because
mm,
like often when you get the standard insoles from a ski boot, they're very thin and they're very flat, and they take up not they don't really take up much volume at all. And then these kind of customizable insoles you buy, you know, from the shop, they're often actually quite thick
mm.
and especially thick in the heel pocket. So can you change as well as changing the angle, you know, so the ramp angle is in terms of like this is my toes, you're higher like this or whatever, or left and right. Can you also change the volume, you know, how big the insole is as well?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So um, basically we can compensate for the boot fit. So say the boot is a little too snug. Someone can just spec the insole 1 millimeter thinner, and so that will just mean that they get that little bit extra bit of wiggle room. Or say the boot's got a little bit roomy, they can do the opposite. And yeah, that's a super regular actually that like it comes up an awful lot, and because people could also do it different for left and right because people's left and
Mm,
right feet are almost always different in some way.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and so we go down to 1 millimeter thickness, which is next to
nothing.
nothing. Yeah, yeah.
That's very cool because that's a big problem for me, especially like for example in my touring boots and like sometimes if you've got this too much volume or lack of volume, you know, the guys will literally be like scraping the insole, like sanding it down,
Yeah,
or they'll be putting lifters in, which of
yeah.
course is not very accurate. It's a bit by feel. Um, so to be able to be like, I actually want to play with that with the insole, which also then doesn't you know destroy the integrity of the insole because it's like
Mm.
if they've built me a stiff insole, but then they're having to shave the insole down, where it's like, well, then the arch is probably getting softer. You know, the like where the insole is on the ball of my feet is getting you know compromised, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, yeah, I want to get a pair. So I need to get
Yeah,
you
we'll
need to
see.
you need to get out to the you need to get out to Europe. We need to get you out on the Kitchener on like doing a demo day or something
Yeah,
like
that
on a
would be
ski
really cool.
festival. Yeah,
This
it'll be
there's an
really good. I
interesting
want to try it.
it's interesting what we're talking about really is how you can retrofit. We're talking about retrofitting a ski boot to make the ski boot more comfortable, and that is the current focus of what Soulmate is. Like we're trying to um, improve the narrative around skiing and its comfort. We capture the plantar scan, that's the underside of the foot scan. However, we also are able to capture, full lower leg scans. And the incredibly interesting thing for this conversation is can we, as technology is evolving, 3D printing just moves so quickly, and materials are being introduced all the time, and new machinery, and it's just all becoming more affordable as well. Can we actually look at, rather than trying to retrofit a ski boot, can we take this 3D scan data and actually be manufacturing core components? Let's say start with liner, but eventually, full boot manufacturing from this 3D scan, and then eventually, then what your starting point then is not this retrofit of this off-the-shelf product. It's actually an entirely customized product from the start, and that's immensely interesting to me, and how we could deliver that in a way that's affordable for people as well, because ski boots, a good ski boot before you've had any work done to it at the moment is 500-600 pounds.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
at the time
Yeah.
this went out, it'll probably be 800 pounds.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. To put it in to put it in perspective, also for me, like as a ski instructor, I have to be buying boots all the time. Reality is sometimes like every 2 years because I've got ideally I've got like a really high level performance boot. The best would be like a kind of comfortable, more kind of cruisy boot, and then a touring boot, like a really aggressive
mm,
touring boot, super light. And then the goal would be to then have a fourth boot, which would be kind of like a hybrid touring performance boot. For like, let's say, the touring boot I need if I'm doing long tours with people, or like, going to a hut or something. Then I need a free ride boot for when I'm like skiing on a heavier ski. I need to be able to have a boot that can drive better. It's got a stronger flex pattern because maybe I'm only doing a little bit of hiking. So those are four boots, and they don't last
right.
forever.
Well,
So
exactly. And at the moment, for anyone who is unfamiliar with the boot fitting process, at the moment you'd go into a ski shop and they'd take your size and they'd take your width, and that ski shop might have 50 different boots in their inventory. But as soon as they're taking your size and width, that's going to probably put you into 10 of them.
mm,
Then, if they are going to evaluate what your skiing level is and also what your height and weight are, and that will drive how stiff the boot is. So then you're probably going to get down to like two or three boots. Then, if you want to be in a racing boot or a touring boot, you're probably in one boot before you've
yeah,
even had the opportunity to try a range of different things. Um, Now, that's that's the status quo. That's just how it works at the moment. But for someone like you, if we were guaranteeing the fit, because the fit of the boot would always be identical, kind of think with a Solemate insole. Say you've got
mm,
your slightly softer, more compliant touring insole, then you've got your stiffer race insole, but these will be exactly the same geometry. They'll just be different in their level of sort of stiffness and compliance.
mm,
So if we're taking you with your touring boot and your racing boot, but we're guaranteeing exactly the same um, comfort, and it's based around exactly the same geometry, you're just able to say, oh, I want a stiff race boot, I want a touring boot with this feature, and it suddenly becomes you're completely flipping the narrative of your ski boot fit, because you're just able to say exactly what you want because the comfort is guaranteed already. And this is just
mm.
I mean, guaranteed is a big word, and that's not how product development tends to work.
Yeah,
But that's I think the obvious evolution of this for me is being able to deliver that reliable, comfortable fit
mm,
that actually enables people to access the features they actually want, because sometimes people are just can't have a certain boot because even though they want it, because it just doesn't fit or doesn't work for them. And that's the wrong way around, in my opinion. It's still in that retrofitting category of things.
yeah,
So this full customization is lives rent free in my mind.
Yeah, no,
And
I love it. I love it because like also like one of my biggest problems is like you always hear in boot shops this word last, which is like the width of the foot, around just behind the big toe where the ball of the foot is, and it's like from across the pinky of those like across like from the knuckles here, it's kind of like there. And as having a person with a wide foot, as soon as I start going into any kind of race boot or performance boot, the last just drops and drops and drops and drops and drops because it's like, oh, it doesn't really make sense for us to target that market. So for me as an individual, I'm completely, you know, left. It's not like they make a narrow boot and a wide boot of the race boots. They just make one boot, and it's like,
yeah,
and it's so consistent between all the brands that they often start to just drop the last, like the width of the boots down as they get to
yeah.
more performance. So it just creates a
I
nightmare,
was,
and
I
then
was
to be
wondering
like,
why that is. Like, is that to do
no,
with boot out? I was wondering if there was.
yeah, I guess because yeah, so I guess if I guess it is, I guess more people ski have smaller feet.
Yeah,
Like
it
because
might
to be
just be
fair,
just a trend as well. Like
yeah, it
simple
could
as
be
that.
the way they have to print the boots, in terms of, when they have the molds, in terms of, the consistency of the flex or whatever, if they start making
Yeah,
it
how
too
they keep
wide.
the stiffness. Yeah, it could be that as well, couldn't
Um, so, but but I have to say, a lot with ski boots, it's a bit of a voodoo thing that's kind of
it?
just happened over time. Like the industry throws around flexes like 150, 130, 110, and it's like each brand has their totally individual flex pattern, has a
Yeah,
like totally individual stiffness. You can kind of compare the plastics that they use in terms of like a race boot would be a certain type of plastic and a touring boot would be a different type of plastic. And that's kind of about it. And
yeah,
you can kind of just say, I would like a race boot or I would like a touring boot or whatever. And that's your categories. Like a Darbello boot will be so like stiffer or not stiffer. Like I find them relatively kind of softer actually. And then like Atomic boot would be pretty stiff. A Fisher boot would be super stiff. So it also depends on you as a person, what you like. And it's a nightmare. Like it can be a real
mm,
nightmare boot fitting. And like you say, that then leads to this kind of guru environment where it's like, oh, this guy is the boot fitter because like he's the one who can cut through all this mysticism and actually get you like a good fitting boot. Um, so
yeah,
that the inconsistency in the boot industry has created this boot fitter
yeah.
style of culture because it's very hard to get standardization like you were talking about, in a boot fit.
Well, it's great. It's crazy as well because it's not witchcraft. The boots are manufactured. They're engineering spec plastics,
Mm.
and it should be that this is standardized. It's not.
Yeah,
Is there's the dimensions, the internal volume of the boot. Although this may not be something that brands share, they're readily available metrics. It was
mm.
manufactured and engineered in wherever the HQ of the boot is. It's just yeah, it's just the narrative that survives is that this is a secretive process, and that's
Yeah,
the thing we're trying to challenge here is that um, the data's there. Like how we
yeah,
just need to use the data. If we can take a
yeah,
3D scan and we can I mean, I suppose that's probably the interim phase for my vision for Soulmate is that if we can get good data on the boots available, can we take that 3D scan and then make a really good recommendation to the person?
yes, yes, yeah,
And then at least it's not just a sort of sizing up and just weighing up the person based on experience. It's actually just a quantitative process.
mm. Yeah, because that's also a big thing is like what boot fitters will do, which a lot of people may not realize is that they'll actually size you up or size you down to what
Mm.
could be your standard fit, to be like, oh, this boot is slightly in the length shorter, but it's going to fit your ankle better because it's going to be less volume, it's going to fit your feet better, and I can just blow out the front of the boot, and use an insole, for example, to help it fit better. Or
Mm.
they could be like, okay, this boot is maybe actually it's a slightly maybe too big for like a tourist, but I can put an insole in there and I can build it up and I can make it more comfortable. that kind of thing. So people kind of also think that when they go to a boot fitter, that they're like, this is my, like kind of like a trainer, like, or a shoe. It's like, oh, this is my size, so this will be my size. It's like, no, they're playing around with these metrics so much. So to get some more, analytics in there and get it a little bit more consistent would
Mm.
also be really good. Because also people make mistakes, like people make mistakes, or they take a risk and they say, oh, I'm going to put you in this boot because I think it's going to be better. And then the person goes skiing and they're like, this is terrible, my heels, it's way too much space, you know. um so there is a lot of, there definitely needs to be some more kind of clear cut, I think, options for people, especially in terms of like customization, but also like standardization of gathering information and how we use that information. Because I also feel like, for example, there are a couple of really good boot fitters in Austria, and they're kind of like camps, and like people go to train with each one, and it's kind of like you've come from almost like, Shogunite Japan, like you've come from this training platform, or you've come from this training platform. It's like you're both fitting boots, you're both working with the same materials, but the way you're going about it is similar, but ends up being different as well.
Mm.
So there definitely needs to be the more standardization in terms of like how we use that information as well, because it's, like I even know people who, they like wet their feet, they put that on a piece of paper, then they cut that out, they lay that in the boot, and they use that as like the guide.
Template, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like the classic thing, like we said earlier, like you buy a custom insole, it comes out of the packet, and then they're cutting it to size, and it's just like, with your system, with the 3D, with a scan, it's going to be a lot more, it's going to be a lot more precise in terms of how it fits into the boot as well. So the
Mm.
integration of the insole, because the thing is, the people who make the insoles are different companies to the people who build the boots. So, the size of their insole, the width of their insole, the length of their insole is actually going to be different from the customizable insole you buy from the shop.
Mm.
But with
So
yours,
what we do with that actually is so the boot will come with it's usually basically a flat piece of
phone.
foam composite fabric
Yeah.
that's in the boot, but it's basically useless for providing any foot support. But what it is useful for is templating the bottom of the boot. And so in a making a traditional insole, like you're describing, Johnny, the that will be used as a template and drawn around onto the custom insole
Mm.
blank and then cut out. What we do at Solemate is with the upload of the scans, an image of the stock insole that comes with the boot is also uploaded, and we also have a like inventory of different stock insoles that go with boots. And so when we 3D print the custom insole, it is shaped to that stock shape for that specific boot. So there's no trimming it down to fit or anything like that. It will be specifically shaped to fit that boot so that it's ready to go as soon as it arrives with the customer. Because
Yeah.
particularly with our customers who have their insoles directly shipped to them, we don't want to have them cutting something down or
Yeah.
doing their
Yeah.
kind of Blue Peter. I don't know if that reference will land with everyone, but kind of doing their cutting,
Paper
cutting
mache.
and sticking to make it all go together.
Yeah. No, that's cool. I like that. No, like you say, that then you get the finished product. You when you unbox the insole, it's the finished product. You put it in your boot and you go skiing.
Mm.
You know, and that to me is also, that's good. I like that. I like, because that I have probably a lot more problems than a lot of other people. So
Yeah.
I might be a bit biased that stuff like this I find super interesting, because I've got constant boot problems. But I think, to be honest, most of the ski industry, this like ski boots is yet to be unlocked. It's yet to be, the skis they're making now are super consistent, super nice. They say there's a lot of innovation, but it's not too much changing. Some brands are doing more, yeah, but I would say the innovation is probably coming more in the free ride and the touring environment, as they start using different materials to make the skis lighter, stronger, torsional, all this kind of stuff. So
Mm.
like there, I would definitely say like the touring skis, like when you compare touring skis 10, 15 years ago to the touring skis now, there's a massive difference, and touring bindings are getting better, but that's the growing market as well, so because people want to
Mm.
get more into touring because it's a positive lifestyle thing, it's healthy. But in terms of like race boot,
Yeah.
I
I mean,
think like
touring, it's
ski
interesting
boots.
because touring bindings, is has got to be one of the areas where there's genuine innovation happening.
Yeah,
Like if you went from, okay, old school tech bindings have been around forever, but things like the shift, there's I can't remember what the marker
ATK,
ones.
the
Yeah,
marker's
the
pretty good.
marker one where they take the
Yeah,
tokens off, like
yeah,
whether or not like I think that seems a cool idea to me, whether or not these are things that stick, but certainly some of these systems you got to say this is new, this is different,
yeah,
and that's super refreshing because yeah, like you say, ski construction, goes through cycles, and
yeah.
it's there's a lot of theatre to it, and this is the newest, greatest thing, but it is refreshing when you do see that genuine innovation coming in. I think I hadn't really thought about it, but you are dead right that touring is one of the areas where
Yeah,
you can
I
see
mean, I
it.
would say to be honest, I know, I'm now skiing with Alan, and they're going to be bringing out skis in the future that sound
Mm,
really cool with what they're up to, and they're trying new things. And I have like, and the touring skis are pretty across most of the major brands, Atomic, Head, everyone. They're all doing new stuff with the touring skis and the touring bindings and the touring boots. I have to say have changed. Touring boots have been changing over the last years and been getting better, but especially in the race department, I think it does cost a lot of money, and in the kind of just like a tourist like nice cruiser performance boot, it's been very very much the same the last,
mm.
I think, 10 years, to be honest with you. Like ever since I've got into the ski industry, they've
Yeah.
changed the colors, but like
Apart from the
yeah,
famous boa going on
yeah,
everything.
yeah, the boa going on everything, but that's an easy
Oh
change,
yeah.
you
Well,
know
I mean, if
because you
anyone who's in the ski industry has, if they've ever heard of snowboarding, they will have heard of boa.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. The bow has been around for years, and of course, I'm not going to say that it might not change something for someone, but ultimately, a four buckle boot, if I look at a touring boot, like a lot of touring boots have two buckles now, and it's like I would love there to be, I'd rather have that extra 300 grams to have four buckles, because one, it adds stiffness and torsional strength to the boot, so I'd much rather have that than having just two buckles or a boa system, because it's simple, it doesn't break, it doesn't, and it's robust, and that's exactly what I need on a touring boot, and I need something that I can just crank up and down, with what I want. So in terms of racing boots, it's not going to come into, um, it's not going to come into, I think, like the racing scene at the high end, but definitely in terms of ease of access, if you just want to like pop it open or close it up, I totally understand. So I think
Yeah.
it's gonna do well in kind of the performance cruiser market, but and it's already been on touring boots for ages. But I personally would prefer touring boots with just as many buckles as possible, ideally
Yeah.
four. Um,
You're such a
because
racer.
yeah, it's just like, I don't mind a power strap, but you just can't beat a buckle by your ankle and above your ankle, and those two
Mm,
buckles, it's just they lock you in, and because it's just, I've seen a lot of people break the boa on a touring boot, when you're
mm.
climbing, or like let's say you slip, which happens quite a lot, and you just like brush over some rocks, it could only be like 40 centimeters, but you just pop the boa straight off. And to be fair, some of them have built that in now, that the boa actually does pop off.
Yeah.
So in this, again, there's innovation there. So the boa now, if it does get smacked, it does just pop off, and then you can pop it back in, which is a really smart way, because if it can't do that, well, then it will break. Um, so that, again, that is changing. But yeah, give me a full buckle touring boot, and I'll take the extra 200, 300 grams every day of the week for just a little bit
Okay.
extra performance. Yeah, 100%. But that's super interesting. How, like, in your rough mind, how long do you think, if it takes 6 hours, 4 to 6 hours to print an insole,
Mm,
how long do you think? I mean, you could probably get a beefier, because I have to say, like the 3D printers that are behind you, they're quite compact, aren't they?
mm,
Like
mm.
they look very compact. So do you think you'd
Yeah,
have to
yeah, we've got some.
upscale the printer and to do like a boot? And how long do you think a boot would take?
Yeah, so this can get very, very technical, but we here, because we're printing the type of material we're printing, it can be printed without an enclosure in an open format.
Mm,
So um, the more complex engineering plastics, particularly stiff materials. So flexible materials, as you're printing, you can end up the material can actually flex as it
Mm,
cools. But
yeah.
if you think about stiff material, if the material is cooling and contracting as the print is ongoing, it can detach from the bed and it can warp and it can
Hmm.
distort. So as soon as you start to get into high strength engineering plastics, things like carbon fiber reinforced nylons, and there's you can kind of carbon fiber reinforce anything. Actually, there's some really interesting exotic materials emerging, but you need to print in an enclosed environment. So we also have enclosure printers for dealing with production of parts like that, and development parts. Um, so in answer to your question, what you'd need is a reasonably large format. Most printers kind of work on a roughly 25 to 30 centimeter build plate, square build plate.
Like,
But you'd need probably need a little bit more for a full boot. Um, Printers can be extremely wasteful in their material usage, because if you imagine you're layering up material in these planes on top of one another, and if you are changing material, and the nozzle of the printer is basically full of the raw material. If you then change material halfway through the print, you have to purge and
mm,
discard all of that material and then introduce the new material and then do it again. And that can literally be thousands of times through a print if you're doing a multi-material print, as a ski boot would need to be. Um, However, there are new systems emerging where you have multiple nozzles that come in at different points and print different
mm,
materials, and that can be way faster and way less wasteful. And so, those in particular are of interest to me at the moment when looking at, like, boot possibility of boot development, and or I'll perhaps call them sort of core boot components, because you do actually probably need to be compositing materials in order to get both tactile and soft. Think about sort of liner type materials, and then stiff reinforcing materials. Um, it's super
it's not
super
easy.
interesting.
It's not even, like, the idea is super cool, but it is, and that's why boot development does cost a lot of money, in terms of, because you're taking a risk when when you develop a new boot and you put it, especially for the standardized boot market. They're trying to make a boot that's going to work for as many people as possible and have a good flex pattern and do all the things and be robust and be all this kind of stuff. So it's a hard thing to get the plastic right, and
Totally, totally.
it
And it's really interesting. Like, the economics of it all are just completely different. So if a boot manufacturer does a 10 size run of boots, so that would be something like Mondo point, which is basically centimeters,
mm,
20.5 to 30.5. Let's say they do that as a size run. The tooling, which is they typically are using injection molding, so they basically have a high grade tooling steel, and producing a mold to produce that size run can be astronomically expensive, like £1 million for the tool.
yeah,
Insane.
yeah,
That's just for the mold, not the machine that sits around it. Um, and that can be quite limiting, and it could also mean that brands stick longer with a design than they maybe
yes, yeah,
should, because they just need to get the return on investment.
yeah.
Um, the thing about 3D printing is that while it's a slower and on the surface, perhaps your unit cost to produce it is a bit higher. Um, Actually, because you don't have that initial tooling. You obviously, of course, have an initial tooling outlay because of the cost of the printer, but
Mm,
it's not £1 million. You're able to pivot a lot more quickly and deliver that, like like up to date, and iterated, evolved product, but also customized
mm.
product for every single person. And so just the whole business format of it is just completely different. And it's super interesting to take into account. The traditional model of, like, a, a consumer ski boot has probably got £5 worth of materials in it, maybe £10 worth of materials in it.
No
But
way.
of course,
No way.
well, of course,
No.
because it's just
It's plastic. Yeah.
ABS or whatever plastic they're
Yeah.
using.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the tooling costs surrounding it, and of course the design costs
Mm.
are what really drive the eventual end cost. So in no way is that me sort of diminishing the value someone gets from a ski boot, because
No. No. There's a lot of
that's
work that
yeah
goes into it.
yeah.
It's a huge
But
process.
the materials are sort of not
Mm.
not so important. It's really that tooling that drives it. Whereas with
Yeah.
3D printing, it's kind of the opposite. We
It's the
use
skill behind it.
yeah yeah, and we're still like, when we are producing a custom install, we're using something like £5 to £10 worth of raw material. So to put that in perspective, we're that seems like quite a lot to me, actually.
Mm.
But that's just the difference between 3D printing and conventional manufacturing. It's just completely different
Mm.
economics. But yeah, yeah, it's a real rabbit hole.
It is a massive rabbit. And like, so what was really cool in the last, I think it's more than 2 years now, or 2 years, Technica. And I have to say, Solomon as a company is very good with this, about trying to use recycled plastics in their products and their skis and all this kind of stuff and in their boots. And Technica now has a program where you can send your boots back in and get things recycled. And
Cool, yeah.
how does that look for the 3D printing industry in terms of, because it's a big thing now, this idea of like, hey, can we use this product again? Can we reuse these products? Can recycle them? Because there's a lot of plastic out there now, and which, like, we still need plastic. Plastic is a fantastic thing that's incredibly
Mm.
useful for us. But how can we? Are the Soulmate insoles recyclable? Would could you see in the future that I'm making insoles out of old insoles? I'm making ski boots out of old ski boots, like that kind of stuff. Is that possible?
Yeah, this is a super cool question. So traditional insoles are usually made using compositing. So that means you're putting two materials together. Uh, the, that can be extremely useful because you can blend the properties of the two different materials. The problem with that is that you then can't take, kind of like baking a cake, you can't take the ingredients apart again. And
Mm.
so that insole is destined to end up in landfill, and that's kind of that's its end of life. With Soulmate, because we use a homogeneous material, that means a single material without blending it with anything. And the way that we achieve the properties within the insole, whether it's the stiffness or the soft or the compliance, is by the way in which we're using that material. So the density with which we're impregnating the insole with the material. At the end of it, you still have this essentially made from single raw material, and so that can be recycled domestically, which is good. It's a good start. What's really interesting is, because it's that single material, is it can actually be shredded and turned back into filament again. Now,
Mm.
we're not at a point where we've created the sort of manufacturing process for that, like the workflow to be
Mm.
delivering that in-house. Like, people send their old insoles back and we shred them, but we are working on partnerships where we can send them back to our like filament manufacturer, because
Yes.
they are geared up to be pelleting, like grinding up pelleting materials and then feeding them back
Yes.
into their process. So um, yeah, that's kind of and that's how you achieve, full circularity in a product of eventually putting as little virgin material into the process,
Into it.
basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because that would be, how cool would that be in the future? You can get your 3D printed insole out of recycled plastic. You can get your 3D printed ski boot out of, maybe semi, depending on the components or the stiffness, or as we get better with understanding plastics working with 3D printers, it could be all recycled, who knows?
Mm,
Uh, and then, you've got your liner as well. Because I'm always, when you think of quality shoes, like let's say you're going to spend 600-700 euros on a shoe, like a pair of brogues, well, you're going
mm.
to go to an amazing shoemaker, and he's going to do all, or she's going to do all of the measuring, all this kind of stuff. They're going to go away. They're going to build you this amazing customized shoe that's going to last forever. They can resole the shoe. And then, like, with skiing, so much stuff is just off the shelf, and it's not customizable like that, except
Mm.
we've got hundreds of thousands, like thousands of years of shoemakers. Because before, if you had any kind of money, and you would have a pair of shoes. There'd be you always some kind of customization in there because a
Mm.
human would be making this shoe. But now obviously with industrial revolution, shoes became kind of standardized, standard sizes, standard whatever. But that premium quality is always still there. You go to a good shoemaker to make you a great shoe. So it's like hopefully with this kind of innovation that you're doing, we can get more of that in the ski industry, and that would
Mm.
be super cool. That would just be
Well, it's just
really
all this
cool.
progress in parallel industries, and I think it's trying to bring. I mean, going all the way back to the first one of the first things I said, which like working for Ride Wrap, is that was extremely influential because bringing that some of that knowledge of technology into this new format, suddenly just worked really well and offered a great benefit. And so they're just, having communication between these different industries that are often doing, things that may be complementary, is super important. There isn't enough of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's awesome, and I'm 100% here for it as an avid skier, as a person who skiing is my job, but I also enjoy it,
Mm.
and I need the things to work on a professional level but I will, and as a non-professional level in terms of comfort, enjoyment, all these things, more customizable insole because I've been chasing customization for a long time now. Going,
Yeah.
for example, my new pair of race boots, which are my next pair. I've paid something in the region of up to €1,000 or over €1,000 in
Mm.
customization, in so much boot fitting, in trying insoles, in trying all these different products to get there. And it's like I'm still missing a lot in that boot,
Mm.
and this last boot has done a great service. But it, it's just the hole is there for sure,
Yeah.
100% in terms of customization with insoles and with boots in the ski market. So yeah, I wish you nothing but the best, and then tell
Yeah.
tell us where we can get your insoles, and tell us where we can get your insoles in the UK, and then hopefully we can get you up to Europe.
Yeah, yeah. So we've got on our website, which I'm sure will be available in the notes, um, like a network of retailers. So we've actually got pretty good coverage now, all the way up from we'd like Manchester and Leeds. We've got some shops through to the south and southeast, and all the way down to Cornwall. We've now got a shop as well. So across the UK, we've got 12 retailers at the moment. I think we'll probably be increasing that to something like 15 to 18 within the next few weeks. Um, and these are, super qualified, both specialist boot fitters, but also fully trained on Solemate. So we'll be able to take the scans for you and just, talk you through all of your options and uh, get you to the end product, right? Um, so definitely check that out if you're interested. Um, we are going to be at a couple of shows in the next few months. These are largely industry shows, so I don't know if any like members of the public can necessarily attend, but we're going to be at Slide, which is like a big SIGB, which is the ski industries of Great Britain, have an industry event, and we'll be attending that. So if anyone works in the ski industry and is interested in having a chat, you can come find us there. We also go to the ski test, which this year is in Champoluc. So this again is an industry-facing event where retailers can attend and test out equipment and make their decisions about what they want to sell ultimately in their shops. So we'll be there and providing samples and demos and things like that. Um, Finally, I'd say that if people want to just follow the journey, like we're only 2.5 years old, we try and journal and just document the whole process on our Instagram page, which is at Solemate Design. And yeah, we try to keep it really authentic. We're not, desperately trying to sell people stuff on there particularly. We actually just want to inform people like this of just like, these are the options, and get people's input and feedback. So
Mm.
yeah, if anyone would like to go and hit us up on that, and you can get in touch that way too.
Awesome. Well, think that's the perfect way to end the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. I'm really, as soon as I saw this, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. I want to try find out more information about that because, yeah, it's innovation and it's new and yeah, it's using the most innovative and modern technology within the ski industry, which, as we're seeing all over the world, 3D printing is growing and getting better and better at what it does. So it's cool that it's coming to the ski industry.
Mm.
It's really cool. And I'm really for it. So thanks for coming on the pod. And yeah, maybe in a year or a couple of years we can catch up again and see where you guys are at and give you guys a follow, get everyone to follow you. I'll drop all the links in when we upload the pod. And yeah, and then hopefully we can get you out to Europe sometime and yeah, maybe get you into some European ski shops. That'd be super cool. And
Yeah,
spread it out there.
absolutely. Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. We'll get you hooked up. We'll make sure you're
Awesome.
not suffering too much anymore in your boots.
Yeah. Yes. And as soon as you got some 3D printed boots, I would love to give that a go.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we
Yes.
need testers, man. We need testers.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So thank you very much. And until the next time.
Thanks, Johnny. Cheers, mate. Thanks, everybody.
Ciao.